On the other hand, we did play a certain role in the formation and choosing of a specific life at a specific time. So there was a certain freedom involved within bardo. So we're always dealing with these two exigencies: karma, what is karmically necessary, and the way in which we respond to the karmic necessity of the particular situation that arises. Our will is free. We can always choose which way we're going to go in a particular situation. And if a relationship, doesn't get karmically resolved the way it's supposed to, it gets stored up for the next time around, and that person will reincarnate with you. Another thing he says is that people tend to reincarnate in groups. They all tend to reincarnate in groups. That's a strange thing. I'm not sure how that works out. But he says, everybody who's living now more or less was living 1,000 years ago. And people tend to be karmically involved with each other within these groups. And it's just sort of an interesting side note. And in karmic relationships, when he's looking at the past lives of all these individuals that he was talking about in the 19th century, he looks into the past life of Darwin and Nietzsche. Most of these individuals, particularly the Darwin, Nietzsche, Francis Bacon, particularly materialists, he says, are normally these reincarnated Arab philosophers. For some reason, there may be an anti-Semitism there. I'm not sure what it is, but he connects the materialism that went on in the 19th century, the descent and decline into materialism, with reincarnated Muslims from 1,000 years ago, from about normally the time of the courts of Harun al-Rashid, about 800 AD. He says, that was 800 AD, we were in the Dark Ages in the time of Charlemagne, and Charlemagne could barely read himself. But in Baghdad, meanwhile, at the courts of Harun al-Rashid, who reincarnates later as Francis Bacon, at the courts of Harun al-Rashid, there was this wonderful renaissance, this culture, these arts and sciences, and these Muslims are just absolutely brilliant. But there's a certain way in which he associates the Arabic mentality with these individuals who reincarnate as materialistic thinkers. And he says Arabism sort of worked its way over across North Africa and came up into Spain and was stopped and then pushed out before the Crusades had even gotten off the ground. The Arabs are basically pushed out of Spain, but then he said there was a wheel there working its way up into Europe that was checked and then resumed through these reincarnations that began then to take place 1,000 years later, when these individuals began to work their way into the culture karmically, bringing the Arabic scientific mentality into our culture. Very strange ideas this man has there, but there's a certain incredible brilliance about them. It's like, where's he coming up with these things? Are they true or are they not? I mean, it's hard to say. But in any event, that's his sort of model of the death process. And anybody have anything they want to discuss with relation to that? Any reflections? Or if not, we can move on to the next. Now, why don't we move on to?
Just a moment. I have to wrote down some questions way back there.
Okay, sure. Okay.
And one, like where you said he doesn't talk about love and sex.
Right.
Very much.
Well, he talks about compassion, love in that sense, but not sexual love, not romantic love.
Okay, because it seems like it's such an important part of the spirit.
Yeah, yeah, and that's in the compassionate sense. The whole, in fact, he says the purpose of cosmic evolution at this point right now is to create love, saturated within the entire. When the Earth has gone through the cycle, the incarnation cycle that it's in now, it will have perfused love throughout everything, and that is the ultimate goal of this phase of our evolution. The past epoch, as we'll see, was the creation of wisdom within, the etheric body, the Jnana Kosha, the etheric sheath. But now it's the creation of love, and the Christ being has a lot to do with bringing this down, and the Buddha also, as he says. But we'll look at that probably after lunch.
Okay, so now it's to saturate everything with love.
Yes, love and compassion are absolutely the most essential thing, I think, in his system, along with this idea of freedom and karma.
Did he ever see love and sex as being connected?
He almost never mentions sex. That's the thing that's missing from
And
Steiner.
that seems so bizarre, because it's so much a part of everything.
Yeah, that's why I think there may be something to this theory about a certain repressed sexuality in him.
Okay, another thing, I have something about the angelic hierarchy, which you might be getting to, but now, is this possibly what we think of as the star ancestors?
As the
star ancestors, I guess I'm thinking of the Native American terminology.
Yeah. Steiner will say, all the world's traditions who have recognized gods of any sort are always these same gods. He's just picked up the Christian terminology, but he would be willing to say these are the same beings that you find recognized in all these other religions. Basically the same, they're just given different names as evolution proceeds.
Because so many other cultures, they have had experiences, and written about them, it's been passed down through their
Yes,
cultures.
and I think he'll say something like, with respect to the Aboriginal cultures, like the Australian Aborigines and their ancestor beings, I think he'll say, these are the Earth's elemental beings that he was talking about that I think are linked with the extraterrestrials that are abducting people. I think these are probably these neglected beings who, I'm not sure what's going on, but there's something to do with the fact that they've been neglected. And, it occurred to me, the similarities, if you read a couple of these abduction accounts, enough of them to just get a familiarity, and I guess you can just watch a couple of the movies like Communion, that Whitley Strieber thing, or the Fire in the Sky. Those give you the basic images of being abducted, taken up into these spacecraft, and these experiments that are performed on them. What I noticed when I thought about those is, that sounds a lot like what shamans describe when they describe their abduction by ancestral beings who come and take them and pull their bodies apart, refill them, they sort of break the bones, they put diamonds into the bones, and they sort of do these tormenting processes to the shamanic initiates, reconstruct them, put them back together, in visionary trance, and then restore them to their community. But now they have deep shamanic powers where they can relate to this. I think there may be something similar is going on here. I think the same process that was happening in shamanic initiation abductions are happening now in these extraterrestrial abductions, but there's a failure. There's somehow, it's not working the same way. It's as though these beings are selecting beings to become these types of shamanic healing individuals. But because our culture can't take that in and doesn't have a model for it, these individuals feel victimized, and they have no idea what's happened to them. And they just think they're victims. But I think what's happening is they're being selected by these beings for special tasks, but they don't know that because they haven't been. There's no precedent in our culture for teaching that. So I think a lot of these are just sort of abortive attempts plus the whole thing. I'm working on this in my book now. The whole thing about these genetic experiments where usually they extract DNA, they tend to extract sperm from men and eggs from women, and supposedly they're making these, a lot of times these human extraterrestrial offspring. And that's a little bit, you can read that poetically and say, well, what does that mean, a human extraterrestrial offspring? Well, look at the Bible. Go back to Genesis 6, and what do you have there? You have the Nephilim. The Nephilim are these fallen angelic beings who descend to the earth because they're attracted to beautiful human women, and they mate with the human women and produce these monstrous giants who are angelic human fusions. And the positive thing is the Nephilim supposedly taught women how to beautify themselves, men how to fight, so they teach all the arts of civilization, but at the same time, they do this spiritual no-no within the Jewish system of the intermixing of man and God. Within the Hebraic system, that's a no-no. And so it's at that moment that God decides to wipe everything out. He doesn't want the divine world intermixed with the human world in the book of Genesis. And that is the reason why he sends the flood. It doesn't so much state that in the Bible. You have to go to the apocryphal text to find that. This book of Jubilees has it very clearly, and 1 Enoch is very clear about this, the reason for God's wiping out. So there is a precedent for this, and I think that these extraterrestrial beings are these angelic beings, and also the Earth's elemental creatures. And this genetic fusion sounds to me like there's a process whereby these beings are trying to fuse with us again, to try to create some kind of spiritual consciousness that will interface with us. And they may be able to sort of change shape and take on the shape that we will, the cosmology of the universe has changed so much, as we saw last night, that we don't buy this crap about angels anymore, but we will accept the idea that there may be beings from other worlds coming.